What's up, guys? Today we're going to be reacting to Task and Purpose video. Can America's missile defense intercept a nuclear ICBM? This is going to be a good video. This, guys, like, share, subscribe. The original title to this video will be in the description, as always, to Task and Purpose. So go follow them, subscribe, all that good stuff. We're going to get into this one. I like the, the American military type stuff tends to do really well on this channel because, America and Britain, we're not too different, are we, with the way we do things militarily? And yeah, can they actually defend themselves against a nuclear ICBM? That's going to be pretty interesting. This is a fantastic channel, guys, who I'm reacting to, so the information I know is going to be spot on. Let's get into it.
What if an intercontinental ballistic missile with a nuclear warhead was launched at the continental United States? Would the U.S. defense system in the homeland be able to shoot it down?
Right, so initially, I'm going to answer it this way. I think it depends on how many ICBMs are going to be used, okay? Could it intercept, the initial onslaught from certain potential countries? Yes, initially I think they would be able to, but it all depends on how many come over. So keep, everything has a sell-by date, and the defense systems is something that needs to be manned constantly as well. So yeah, I don't think they'd be able to survive it long term, but the initial onslaught, yes.
Exactly how much warning would we have to choose how to respond? Since the Cold War, the United States has spent more than $100 billion on missile defense to date. What type of capabilities has this multi-generational system translated into today? I want to go down the rabbit hole of missile defense capabilities. This is the R-7 Semyorka, the world's first intercontinental ballistic missile made by the Soviet Union in 1957.
Wow.
This weapon suddenly made the world a much smaller place with its vast
5,000 mile range. Okay, so that's big.
Range of 5,000
almost 5,000 miles.
Traveling roughly the distance from Moscow to Washington in just 30 minutes.
That's
and
crazy.
Capable of delivering a 6,000-pound nuclear warhead. This weapon would change every calculation we had about war between the great powers. A missile defense system aims to protect an area from attack. First, it locates and tracks incoming ballistic missiles using satellites and radars. Second, it launches another weapon to destroy the incoming missile before it hits its target. This is often described as hitting a bullet with a bullet. So, how do you build a defensive system based on such odds? Well, you need to tilt the odds in your favor. And to do that, you need to choose your bullet wisely. Interceptors, also known as anti-ballistic missiles or ABMs, these purely defensive missiles usually consist of two parts, and all U.S. interceptors still do: a booster rocket and a kill vehicle. Most interceptors operate on a hit-to-kill basis, where the kill vehicle smashes into the incoming missile to destroy it. However, some interceptors use a blast fragmentation warhead instead. The concept of intercepting missiles in this way really spoke to Cold War era strategy.
The problem with this, though, I'm thinking straight away, is the fact that they rely on satellites to be able to, to locate the trajectory of the other missiles. So it requires a lot of infrastructure and a lot of other technology to be able to allow it to work in the first place. If that goes down, then guess what? It ain't going to work as effectively as it should do. So there's a lot of things that could go wrong with this. If you take out the satellite infrastructure first, then obviously that's going to affect it. So yeah, this is a tricky one, this.
Yes, especially after someone had the idea to equip the interceptors with the genius idea of adding a nuclear warhead to it. A dangerous and antiquated idea that has fortunately since been retired. How did we evolve into a more sophisticated approach? But first, this episode's sponsor is PDS Debt Solutions. We all go into debt one time or another in our lives. Sometimes it's to obtain a big ticket item like a house or a car. From 1964 that outlined for the first time how the United States satellite network, its newest network, was able to finally detect clandestine nuclear missile tests halfway across the world.
It's crazy to me that 60 years ago we were thinking about this whole nuclear threat, and it's just something that's been going on for, twice my lifetime. It's crazy to think that we've been in that mindset ever since.
The early warning network was called MIDAS, or Missile Detection Alarm System, which was started in 1959 and had originally been plagued with problems. The way MIDAS worked was by measuring radiation using infrared sensors on the satellites that any missile launch would create. It also worked in collaboration with a tracking radar that was located in southern Turkey. What this ultimately meant was that it could detect missile launches within 5 minutes, as opposed to 15 minutes that the old prior Alaska early warning radars in Greenland and Scotland offered during the 1950s. Realistically, leadership only has about 10-15 minutes to make a decision on how you want to react or verify if it's a real threat. By this point, the United States had some 180 satellites monitoring in space. The Department of Defense in 1964 even commented at the time, saying that they were working on an over-the-horizon capability that would detect missile launches in just mere seconds.
That's
now, that's
crazy.
some foreshadowing right there. A lot of times I see people commenting, wondering why countries like the United States, China, and Russia have thousands of nuclear warheads when, hypothetically, it's possible just a few hundred could suffice to destroy the Earth entirely several times over.
That's actually a good point. I've never really thought about it like that. What's the point of having an arsenal of thousands of these things when, realistically speaking, you probably wouldn't get to use thousands anyway before you caused like global catastrophic damage? Makes me think, have we actually got those numbers?
The potential effectiveness of missile defense systems that we're going to look at might be the answer to that question. Both the Soviets and the United States developed nuclear-armed defense systems that combined a high-altitude interceptor missile, like the US Spartan and Soviet Kalash, with a terminal phase interceptor, like the US Sprint and Soviet Gazelle. Now, the US system was called the Nike Zeus, which was specifically designed to succeed against a few dozen missiles in the event of a Soviet attack. But in response, the Soviets said that they were building hundreds of missiles, so the US had to double down and build hundreds of their own.
Right, so we got the nuclear arms race then, basically. That's what they're coming to.
And reevaluate if the Zeus could handle a lot of missiles at once.
Nike Zeus Bell system.
This nuclear growth rate was unsustainable and exponentially more dangerous for everyone. The Cuban Missile Crisis raised the stakes, and after escalating threats from both the Soviets and the United States, both countries decided to sign the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty in 1972.
Okay.
The treaty lessened the need for more nuclear weapons to keep deterrence strong by establishing strict limits on missile defenses for both countries, where each side could only have 2 anti-ballistic missile sites, and each site could have a maximum of 100 anti-ballistic missiles. Despite the idea of deterrence and the fear of mutually assured destruction, the Soviets kept building up their arsenal. In 1978, they had 600 intermediate-range nuclear missiles on land.
That is crazy when you think about the absolute power that these things can generate. Sheer chaos and mayhem. And they've got hundreds of these things, absolute hundreds. Like, when you think about it, is there really a need for that?
2 years later, they added 200 more. By 1983, President Ronald Reagan addressed the nation, saying that the USSR had 1,300 new warheads, adding about 3 new ones each week, while the United States didn't even have 1 new one. Because of this massive buildup, President Reagan announced a new defense system against Soviet first strikes. It was called the Strategic Defense Initiative, or SDI for short.
Did he just say STI for short? Hopefully not.
Instead of just scaring off the Soviets, this plan aimed to make their nuclear weapons obsolete. They wanted to do this by setting up 1,000 ground-based missile interceptor and hundreds of interceptors in space, which is why people called it Star Wars.
And now we're laughing at, you know, the Space Force and stuff, but you start to see where their role might actually be more pertinent than you think, okay, with regards to the threat and the ongoing threat of nuclear capabilities throughout the world. Space Force, although we like to rip them a bit, they're actually quite an asset, that's for sure.
With the collapse of the Soviet Union, the rush to defend against them faded away, and the Strategic Defense Initiative was scaled back. The first thing that was canceled was that space bit. Instead, the focus went to theater systems such as the US Patriot missile. By the end of the 1990s, the US hadn't brought back a national missile defense system because there was a lot of technical problems and it would violate the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. But then, the next year, 9/11 happened and the world changed.
Yeah, that changed everything. Absolutely everything. This is one thing. 9/11, if you were alive and you were, you know, compass mentis enough to be able to understand what was going on that day, you can remember where you were and what you were doing. I know I can, and I was like, what, 11, 12 years old at that point?
President George Bush quickly pulled out of the ABM treaty, and the U.S. got to work on a defense system against missiles from smaller powers or rogue states.
Who are we talking about with these smaller powers? North Korea and Iran.
I was just about to say North Korea and Iran.
Ballistic missiles from Russia and China would very likely overwhelm the system. However, an attack from North Korea or Iran could potentially be intercepted.
They needed the system to be operational by October 2004, and they named it the Ground-Based Mid-Course Missile Defense System, and it's still around today, or GMD for short. It's designed to protect all 50 states from a limited long-range ballistic missile attack. In truth, the GMD is a global system with 11 elements that span 15 time zones.
That must cost an absolute crazy amount of money. Like, trillions and trillions. It has to be, right? To keep that up and running all this time and the sheer size of it. It's a global thing. I might be massively off with those numbers. Someone enlighten me.
And each element has to be precisely coordinated.
Yeah.
And if something fails, everything can go wrong. According to Annie Jacobson's book, Nuclear War, a
I've seen this. I seen like a clip of what she was saying. It seemed like something out of science fiction. It was literally terrifying what she was saying. Basically, nuclear war happens, we're all absolutely doomed. No question about it. We're proper screwed.
scenario in which she interviewed the actual military and civilian experts who built these weapons and developed all the response plans. She outlined how modern-day satellite missile tracking can detect an ICBM launch in just mere seconds. However, on the other hand, new developments in submarine and air-launched nuclear missiles meant that instead of a 30-minute warning, it could be as little as 15 minutes to reach their targets. Let's talk about the elements that make the GMD what it is, starting with how it tracks missiles, and then we'll dive into how it destroys them. The GMD tracking depends on 7 types of sensors: land, sea, and space. The land ones include 2 early warning radars, one in the East Coast and one located in the West Coast, and 3 upgraded early warning radars that are currently deployed in California, the UK, and Greenland.
Okay. I'm shocked to see the UK, actually. I've never heard of this. Right, let's delve into this. What is it, man?
These radars classify objects as threatening, non-threatening, and then the higher resolution radars are used to observe and discriminate. There's also 5 units of the Army-Navy Transportable Radar Surveillance, ANTPY-2 radar, which are high-resolution X-band radars built specifically for missile defense. The US has 2 in Japan, 3 in the Middle East, and there's the massive Cobra Dane, a large L-band
Whoa, that looks proper cool. Cobra Dane.
radar stationed in Alaska.
I've never heard of that.
It looks like a colossal speaker
Whoa, that is crazy. That is crazy. How come I've never heard of this thing before?
with a 95 feet in diameter.
Imagine being in the military and then getting your first draft to the Cobra Dane in Alaska. You're not going to be a happy chappy, trust me.
It can detect objects out to 2,000 miles away, giving it the best detectability performance of small objects among existing systems. Finally, the long-range discrimination radar, or the LRDR, because far away judgy things doesn't sound technical enough. It's a long-range antenna made up of solid-state radar blocks that can be pieced together like an overly complex set of Legos to scale up to the size of the radar. This radar is located in Alaska and isn't fully operational yet. There's also the C-band X-band radar SBX. This unique radar sits atop a decommissioned North Sea oil rig now stationed in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. It
Wow, how ironic. Pearl Harbor, eh?
delivers exceptional
Wait, hang on. There's people working on that? SBS operational crew is made up of civilian contractors.
high resolution images. However, the high resolution
Right. There can't be people on there. I mean, there've got to be maintenance crews and stuff, but this thing needs a crew to work it on. So this is like an offshore kind of job. Them guys are going to be paid a lot of money, trust me, because that, in terms of its infrastructure and the danger towards it, threats and stuff like that associated with it, you're going to need a crew on there. And maybe it's even SF guys. I don't know.
comes with a trade-off: a narrow 25-degree viewing arc. In fact, in November 2016, the SBX was dispatched to North Korean waters to monitor the testing of its new IRB missile. Adding to these
How long would that have taken to get there? Pearl Harbor, like, actually not. Yeah, it's still going to take a long time to get that bloody thing there, right?
layers of early warning systems. If we look up to the skies, there's the Space Tracking and Surveillance System, which are 2 satellites orbiting the Earth and tracking missile launches, using their sensors and data processors to discriminate between warheads and decoys. And there's the Space-Based Infrared System, which is a constellation of 8 integrated satellites in orbit, plus processing and command control centers.
Right, so basically what we've heard so far is it's just a monumental task to be able to have this system in place anywhere. It's crazy, the infrastructure that's involved.
These were the very systems that were used
Right, so satellite sensor to the left and one to the right.
in April 2024 to instantly detect and track Iran's ballistic missiles fired against Israel.
Okay.
Now, the ground-based mid-course defense system's destructive phase is primarily carried out by the ground-based interceptors, or GBIs for short. They're located at 2 main sites. The first site is in Fort Greely, Alaska, housing 4 GBIs, while the second site is at Vandenberg Air Force Base in California, where 40 deployed GBIs are. In total, there are 44 GBIs in operation. These interceptors are launched from silos and targeting ballistic missiles during their mid-course phase, when they're at their highest trajectory and outside the atmosphere.
Okay.
Each GBI comprises 3 components. First is the boost vehicle, a multi-stage rocket booster that propels the kill vehicle from its silo into space. The boost vehicle's 3 stages enable longer-range intercepts. Second is the EKV itself. After the booster burns out, the EKV separates and uses onboard sensors to detect an incoming warhead before maneuvering to collide with it.
Wow.
Equipped with its own seeker, guidance system, and motor, all of this sounds good, all right? But does it really work? And will it protect the homeland in case of an attack?
But what about the critics of America's missile defense system? What do they have to say?
The Union of Concerned Scientists has called the GMD system hugely expensive, counterproductive, offer no proven capability.
No proven capability, yes, but we understand the capability that we're dealing with. So it might not be proven, but the theory of its capability is still there, okay? It's just like loads of things, no proven capability. But, you know, you'd rather have the ability to have that capability than not. And it's counterproductive. It's only counterproductive until you need it. Then it's productive. It's like security in general. I always say, you know, security is something that you pay a lot of money for in certain circumstances. So, for instance, you've got door supervisors, all right? Yeah, waste of money until you need them, okay? Until a fight kicks off, then they're worth every penny. But 99% of the time, they're not doing anything. So it's one of those, isn't it? You have to weigh up the risk factor. So, yeah, it is hugely expensive. Isn't all security for that matter.
To protect the United States, and no credible path forward for achieving success. Scholars, experts, members of the military, and politicians have all replicated the message that GMD isn't enough. All their disapproval can be summarized in 4 points of concern. In 2022, the American Physical Society released a study assembled by a group of 13 physicists and nuclear weapons policy experts, where they raised questions regarding the effectiveness of the GMDs against one of the biggest challenges faced by the missile defense system: countermeasures. For instance, attackers might use lightweight decoys to confuse the sensors of...
Yeah, and I know where they're going with this, and then it's very, very ineffective in terms of its cost, okay? So you're using this bloody expensive thing to counteract something that costs literally nothing, all right? So, yeah, it's one of those.
Interceptor missiles. Since objects of differing weights follow the same path in space, deploying decoys during the mid-course phase can make it difficult for interceptor missiles to accurately detect the actual warhead. This may lead the missile defense system to attempt to destroy all incoming objects, depleting its limited supply of valuable interceptors. Likewise, cooled shrouds can be employed to decrease the temperature of a warhead, making it either invisible to interceptor missiles, which rely on infrared sensors, or reducing the interceptor's capability to detect the warheads rapidly. The study found no viable or effective improvement against these countermeasures. Another major problem is that the system could easily be overwhelmed by a large number of missiles. According to the former Assistant Secretary of Defense and U.S. Chief Weapons Evaluator Philip Coyle, all missile defense systems can be overwhelmed.
Yeah.
All missile defense systems have limitations, and those limitations can be exploited by the offense. By definition, it is only if the attack is limited that the defense can have a hope of not being overwhelmed.
On April 13th, 2024, one of the largest adversarial ballistic missile attacks in history was launched against Israel by Iran. And initial reports seem to indicate that Iran tried many of these exact countermeasure decoy techniques to attempt to overwhelm Israel's air defense systems. We know Iran attacked Israel with 120 ballistic missiles, 30 cruise missiles, and 170 drones.
Wow, I didn't know it was 170 drones.
According to the United States, 95 to 99% of all of Iran's ballistic missiles and weapons were intercepted successfully.
Yeah.
There are still competing theories about whether Iran used...
Right, so, but one thing's to say, the Iron Dome as a system itself is like, literally, it's right up there with its capability. It's very, very smart technology indeed, okay? Probably is the best on the planet for what it does. So you might go, well, that 95, 99% success rate. Okay, well, you only need one or two of those things to get through the net, which it did, to cause catastrophic damage. So these things, for how much money gets pumped into them, they really need to be, 100% to start with for the initial onslaught. After that, obviously, it's about its capability past that point, okay? But initially, I would say, for how much you're paying, you need that 100% satisfaction guarantee, don't you?
Use their full capabilities, or if Israel used their full defensive capabilities. But either way, it's an indication that hitting a bullet with another bullet has become more feasible. However, it's true, just because fighter jets can intercept cruise and intermediate range missiles doesn't necessarily mean success against intercontinental ballistic missiles has improved. ICBMs travel 27 times faster and launch multiple payloads that can maneuver in midair.
Wow.
That's why I think one of the most impressive lessons gleaned from Iran's attack on Israel was that Israel's Arrow interceptor appeared to have scored an exo-atmospheric kill against a ballistic missile. That means it hit a missile outside the Earth's atmosphere, which is extremely difficult to do, and some place the odds at as low as 50% in the past.
Okay.
Either way, we're quickly learning about the capabilities of new interceptor missiles. Laura Grego, a nuclear expert at MIT, who co-chaired a recent study of the GMD, said, quote, "This idea of an impenetrable shield against an enormous arsenal of Russian missiles is just a fantasy."
I was just about to say, it's like fantasyful.
In the end,
Fantasyful? What's the word? Fantasy.
the core of this issue is still the same that existed in the 1970s. You can produce missiles way faster than
I've just realized his t-shirt. How cool is that t-shirt, man?
interceptors. The
ADHD kicking right in there.
second point of concern are the GMD's failed intercept tests. When the US has tested its own ABM, anti-ballistic missile systems, the success rate has been considerably less than 50%, and that's with the AMB operators knowing in advance when and where incoming will occur and their route.
That's not good enough then. If you know where, when it'll occur, less than 50%, that's not good. For the amount of money it keeps to keep these things operational, I wouldn't be happy with that at all.
The third point of concern is the cost. In 2016, the GMD had already cost more than $40 billion. If you take into account
That's
the
insane.
70 years of research and investment, the number is closer to $350 billion.
The
That's not good enough, man.
final point of
That's a fortune.
concern that's been raised is that theoretically the GMD isn't designed to protect against Russian or Chinese intercontinental ballistic missiles.
It's designed to be effective against an accidental or rogue missile launch. This comes as no surprise. It's known, the US Department of Defense says so in its 2022 National Defense Strategy, that the GMD is neither intended nor capable of defeating the large and sophisticated ICBM from Russia and the PR.
Wow, so they've just basically said, yeah, if it happens, we can't defend against it. I'm surprised they've actually admitted that. They're lying about one thing, that or their capability. I think it might be the capability, but that just might be because I'm patriotic to the United States. I don't know.
RC. The United States relies on strategic deterrence to address those threats. David Baresh, the professor at the University of Washington, who's written about preventing nuclear war, recently said that the prospects of the US or anyone successfully intercepting ICBMs are meager.
But does that only refer to China's 350 ICBMs and Russia's 760? Because if we look at North Korean capabilities, they have about 50 nuclear warheads in total, but they only have a max of about 16 ICBM launchers, if we believe what they've shown in their military parades.
Yeah, those military parades with the cardboard cutout weaponry. I don't know about that.
What this means is the United States' current missile defense system could theoretically shoot those down, even if we assume a low hit probability of 50%. One day before I published this video, I noticed that Lockheed Martin had just won a $17 billion contract to produce 20 of the new next generation GBI Interceptor. Now, the main difference with this technology is that it's going to have a multiple kill vehicle, which means it'll be able to strike multiple nuclear payloads. So the hit probability will only increase. And it's said that this will become operational by 2028. The Pentagon's top testing official, the Director of Operations Test and Evaluation, .E&T, published a report that found that taken together, the various missile defense programs are capable of doing what they're designed to do. What this means is that the US is not absolutely defenseless, as some critics have said, and that it still leads the world in terms of missile defense. Also, I should note that the Pentagon challenged the study by the American Physical Society, and the organization has since unpublished the study to revise its conclusions.
Wow, okay, so that's actually states a lot then, guys. If they've deleted it to revise their, what they've came up with in the first place, either they got a lot of money to do so, or they were wrong. So I'll let you guys decide on that.
Back in the day, the United States and the Soviet Union signed the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty to put limits on these missile defense systems. But now, with new players on the scene like China, Iran, and North Korea, the rules...
Look at him, man. Look at him. Bloody jacket like Blade.
Rules of the game have changed, and deterring seems to be insufficient to keep the risks under control. Some see the United States missile defense system as a guardian angel, standing watch to protect against incoming threats from the skies. Others see it as a dated, ineffective mirage against larger and more pressing threats.
Troops, can America's missile defense intercept a nuclear ICBM? I think we've established that, yes, it can. Is it going to be effective against a large-scale attack? They've already admitted no. I don't know if I believe that or not. I don't know what their intention would be to say that. Even if it couldn't, I can't see America admitting that in the first place, especially like openly, publicly. But that's a bit strange, that one, guys. Fantastic video, as always, by Task and Purpose. I've reacted to a few of their videos now. I think it's okay for me to do so. Make sure you go follow them, guys. That's the most important thing. Without their hard effort in this content creation, we wouldn't be able to react to it and add our opinions on it anyway. Task and Purpose, I believe, is a former military guy. So, yeah, make sure you go and show them some love and drop a comment stating that I am giving them all the props in the world, because they really are a fantastic channel, guys. If I could be half the success channel, if I could get half their success, I'd be happy. Okay, guys? But number of good things coming your way. I am in talks with, hopefully teaming up with Force Radio, okay? And they've got a number of good things going on, guys. So go check out their YouTube channel, and the link will be in the description. I've already got a podcast with them. I did a podcast. I was asked onto the show by Phil Campion, who hosts the Debrief podcast. If you want to hear more about me, a little bit more about the background story of me and stuff like that, you may be surprised to hear a few things that I actually say on there. But yeah, go show some love, and I'll see you in the next video, troops. Peace.